The day my husband died, the sky was the color of mourning, gray, heavy, and unforgiving. Rain fell in thin, steady lines, as if the world itself was crying quietly, afraid to be too loud in the face of death. I remember standing by the window, watching drops race each other down the glass, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. He was late. He was never late. When the phone rang, my heart knew before my mind did. I answered with a weak smile already forming, ready to scold him gently. Instead, a stranger's voice spoke my name with careful slowness. There had been an accident, a truck. A wet road. Words blurred together, crashing into me like waves I couldn't outrun. By the time I reached the hospital, it was already over. They let me see him for a moment. His face looked peaceful, as if he were only sleeping, but his hand was cold when I touched it. I pressed my forehead to his chest and waited stupidly, desperately, for his heart to beat again. It never did. Something inside me broke so completely that I knew I would never be the same woman again. At the funeral, people whispered condolences I barely heard. Black clothes, wilted flowers, hollow prayers. I stood there like a shadow, my body present while my soul wandered somewhere far away, lost between yesterday and forever. One hand rested unconsciously on my stomach, a silent instinct I didn't yet dare to explain to anyone. I was pregnant 8 weeks, a fragile secret growing quietly inside me, the last living piece of the man I had just buried. My mother-in-law stood beside the grave, her face stiff and dry. Not a tear touched her eyes. She accepted sympathy with nods, her lips pressed tight, as if grief were an inconvenience rather than a wound. When the crowd thinned and the final prayers were said, she turned toward me. Her gaze was sharp, cutting through my numbness. "Come," she said flatly, "let's go." There was no comfort in her voice, no warmth, just command. That night, the house felt unfamiliar, as if it had already rejected me. My husband's things were everywhere, his shoes by the door, his jacket on the chair. But his presence was gone, leaving behind an ache so deep it stole my breath. I sat on the edge of the bed we once shared, holding my stomach, tears finally breaking free. I told her after dinner. "I'm pregnant," I said softly, my voice shaking. "It's his." For a moment, she stared at me in silence. Then she laughed. It wasn't the laugh of disbelief. It was cruel, sharp, and full of scorn. "You think I'm a fool," she snapped. "Now that my son is gone, you come with this story." My heart pounded. I would never lie about this. "I swear enough," she shouted, standing up so suddenly her chair scraped the floor. "You will not trap this family with your schemes. I won't allow it." The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, she threw my suitcase at my feet. My clothes were stuffed inside carelessly, like trash being discarded. "You are not welcome here anymore," she said coldly. "And that thing inside you, get rid of it. I won't have it connected to my son's name." I couldn't speak. My throat closed as if invisible hands were choking me. She opened the gate and pointed outside. "Go." I stepped out onto the street barefoot, the cold ground biting into my skin. The gate slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed through my bones. I stood there in the early morning light, widowed, pregnant, and abandoned, holding my stomach as if it were the only thing keeping me standing. That was the moment I understood something terrifying and true. I had lost my husband, and now I was about to lose everything else. The street became my world the moment the gate closed behind me. I stood there for a long time, staring at the house that had once been my home, waiting for the door to open again, for her anger to soften, for mercy to appear. It never did. The windows remained dark, silent witnesses to my humiliation. Eventually, I turned away, clutching my suitcase with numb fingers, carrying my grief and my unborn child into an uncertain future. That first night, I slept on a cold wooden bench near the bus station. The air smelled of diesel and rain, soaked concrete. Every sound made me flinch footsteps, distant horns, the echo of laughter from people who still had places to go. I curled my body around my stomach, as if my arms alone could shield the tiny life inside me from the cruelty of the world. "I'm sorry," I whispered again and again. "I promise I'll protect you. Hunger followed quickly. By morning, my head throbbed and nausea rolled through me in waves. Pregnancy made everything harder: the walking, the standing, even breathing felt heavy. I spent the day wandering, afraid to sit too long in one place, afraid of being asked questions I couldn't answer. When evening came, my legs gave out, and I sank onto the steps of a small clinic with a faded sign that read "Free Medical Services." A nurse noticed me just as darkness fell. She didn't ask why I was there or where I came from. She only took my hand and led me inside. Warmth wrapped around me like a forgotten memory. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt safe enough to cry. The tears came silently, sliding down my face as I lay on a narrow bed, my hand resting protectively over my womb. The doctor was kind. He spoke softly, explaining each test, each question. When he asked about my husband, my voice cracked as I answered. I told him everything: the accident, the pregnancy, the rejection. He listened without judgment, his brow furrowing deeper with every word. After the examination, he studied my reports longer than usual. His eyes moved back and forth, his expression growing serious. My heart raced. Is something wrong with my baby? I asked, panic rising in my chest. No, he said quickly. Your baby is strong, but there is something unusual. He explained that my blood work showed a rare genetic marker, one that could only come from the father. It wasn't dangerous, but it was extremely uncommon. When he mentioned my husband's name and asked if he had ever spoken about family medical issues or legal matters, my confusion deepened. I don't understand, I said. What does this mean? The doctor took a careful breath. It means your child is proof of lineage, proof that cannot be denied. The words settled slowly like seeds in broken soil. He went on to explain that families with this genetic marker often had registered medical trusts, funds created generations ago for health care and inheritance purposes. Without a living heir carrying the marker, those trusts became inaccessible. I thought of my mother-in-law's face. Her cold eyes, her demand that I get rid of it. My hands began to shake. She knew. I whispered. She must have known something. The doctor didn't disagree. He simply placed a reassuring hand on mine. Whatever the reason she pushed you away, understand this: you and your child matter. You are not powerless. That night, as I lay in the clinic's small recovery room, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I was still homeless, still grieving, still terrified, but something inside me had shifted. For the first time since I was thrown out, hope flickered faintly in the darkness. They had tried to erase me. They had tried to erase my child, but now I knew the truth. I was not abandoned by fate. I was being prepared. Recovery did not happen overnight. Healing never does. The clinic became my temporary shelter, but more importantly, it became the place where I slowly learned how to breathe again. Each morning, I woke to the steady rhythm of my heartbeat and the quiet reassurance that my baby was still growing inside me. That small, constant life became my anchor. The doctor introduced me to a legal aid volunteer a few days later. She was a woman with calm eyes and a voice that carried both patience and strength. When she heard my story, she didn't gasp or pity me. She listened carefully, taking notes, asking gentle questions that helped me remember details I had pushed away in grief. Your husband was preparing something, she said after reviewing the information. A trust transfer. He started the process months ago. The words struck me like a distant echo. I remembered the nights my husband stayed up late, reading documents, closing his laptop quickly when I entered the room. He had smiled then, kissed my forehead, and said, "Soon everything will be secure." I had thought he meant our future together. He had meant our child. The lawyer explained that the family inheritance had strict conditions. The assets, medical coverage, and properties could only be claimed by a verified heir, one who carried the rare genetic marker passed down through generations. Without that proof, the trust remained locked, untouchable, and my baby was the key. Suddenly, my mother-in-law's cruelty made sense. Her rush to erase my pregnancy wasn't fueled by grief alone. It was fear of losing control, fear that everything she believed was hers would pass to someone she despised. The truth hurt, but it also empowered me. I decided then that I would not hide anymore. With the legal aid team's help, I filed the necessary documents to protect my unborn child's rights. My name was added as the legal guardian. The trust was notified of a potential heir. Each step felt terrifying, yet strangely liberating, like reclaiming pieces of myself I didn't know I had lost. Months passed, my belly grew rounder, my body ached, but my spirit strengthened. I moved into a small shared apartment arranged through a women's support program. It wasn't much, just one room and a window that faced a brick wall. But it was mine. No one could throw me out. No one could silence me there. I talked to my baby every night. I don't know what kind of world you'll be born into. I whispered, rubbing my stomach, but I promise you won't be born into fear. Sometimes memories of my husband overwhelmed me. I missed his laugh, the way he used to rest his hand on my back when I cooked, the warmth of his presence. But instead of breaking me, those memories became fuel. He had trusted me. He had believed in me. I would not fail him. The legal confirmation arrived in my 7th month of pregnancy. The trust officially recognized my child as the sole surviving heir, pending birth verification. When I read the letter, my hands trembled not with fear, but with relief. I had won a battle without raising my voice. Far away, consequences were unfolding. I didn't need to see my mother-in-law to know it. The trust restrictions affected her access to funds. Medical coverage she depended on was suddenly under review. Doors she thought were permanently open began to close. For the first time, the power had shifted. I wasn't seeking revenge. I didn't need to. The truth was doing that for me. As I lay down that night, one hand on my belly and the other clutching the letter, I realized something profound. I was no longer the woman who had been thrown out into the rain. I was a mother, and I was finally free. My son was born on a quiet morning, just as the sun began to rise. No storms, no shouting, just a soft cry that filled the room and stitched my broken heart together in ways I never thought possible. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I felt something powerful settle inside me, not anger, not grief, but certainty. We had survived. He had his father's eyes, deep, calm, observant. I traced his tiny fingers and whispered his name, promising him a life where love would never be conditional. The weeks that followed were exhausting and beautiful, sleepless nights, soft lullabies, warm milk, and quiet prayers. The trust's verification process was completed without drama. Blood tests confirmed what we already knew. My son was officially recognized as the sole heir. I didn't celebrate with champagne or loud victory. I celebrated by breathing freely. Then one afternoon she came. I knew it was her before I opened the door. Some instincts never fade. She stood there thinner, older, her posture no longer proud. Illness had taken its toll. Her eyes, once sharp with authority, now searched my face with desperation. "I heard you had a son," she said quietly. I stepped aside without a word and let her in. She looked around my modest apartment, the simple furniture, the baby's crib near the window, the quiet dignity of a life rebuilt from nothing. When she saw my son sleeping peacefully, her knees buckled. She sat down heavily, covering her mouth as tears spilled freely. "I was wrong," she sobbed. "I didn't know I was afraid. I said nothing at first. Silence, I had learned, can be louder than any accusation." She confessed everything, the inheritance, the fear of losing control, the belief that without her son, she deserved everything he left behind. She spoke of regret, of sleepless nights, of doctors' warnings and locked doors. Finally, she looked up at me. "They say only your child can help me now," she whispered. "Please let me see him, let me live." I studied her face, the same face that had ordered me into the street, the same voice that had demanded I destroy my unborn child. And yet, holding my son had changed me. "I won't punish you," I said softly, "not because you deserve forgiveness, but because my child deserves a future untouched by hatred." Her shoulders shook as she cried harder. I allowed the medical cooperation, the tests, the procedures. My son's existence saved her life, but that was where it ended. I did not return to her house. I did not ask for apologies or explanations. I did not reclaim what had once been taken from me. I walked away, with my dignity intact. Months later, I stood in a park watching my son take his first steps. He laughed when he fell, pushing himself up again and again, fearless. I realized then that this was the truest form of revenge. Not bitterness, not cruelty, but rising so high that the past could no longer reach me. I had been widowed, pregnant, and discarded. They tried to erase me. They tried to erase my child. Instead, we became the future they could never control. As the sun dipped low and my son reached for my hand, I smiled not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer owned me. My story did not end with betrayal. It ended with peace.